Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we have a look at the 1984 film Firestarter. This is episode 370, and it is 1 week after we discussed the brand new 2022 Firestarter. So it's kind of fun. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So, warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castle Bridge Media, home of the Castle of Horror anthology. With me from Austin is Tony Savaggio, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. And I just saw a band photo of you where you are all gothified
Oh yeah,
with
back
the
in the
band
day.
Antigone. So welcome.
Yeah, it's World Goth Day, so I had to pull those out because that's
That was pretty cool. That was very
before I
cool.
was in a stoner rock band. I was in industrial bands and I was in a dark wave band with my wife, who I met through Musicians Wanted ad. That's our story.
Oh,
I've always
that's
loved that.
beautiful. Well, I knew you then. I mean,
Good time. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was around for
I think you came
Antigone.
to an Antigone show.
I sure
Yeah,
did. I
yeah.
loved it. Also in Austin, Mr. Drew Edwards is the writer-creator of the long-running underground comic Halloween Man, currently published by Comixology. He is a Best Writer Ringo nominee, Austin Chronicle Best of Austin Award winner, and a member of the PEN America Fellowship. Say hello, Drew.
Hello.
Hello. Not a goth, Mr. Drew. In my mind,
It's a short walk.
yeah,
Yeah.
but,
We were
you know,
running the same circles.
Drew, in my mind, I remember you dressed more or less like the Joker with a great green vest and a hat, looking like Green Day, basically. Those were the days. I've known you a damn long time. And finally, also in Denver, another person I've known for a fair amount of time, color commentary from Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
Hello, and thank you for not saying the amount of years, because usually you say it, and I'm like, actually, usually you round
Mm.
up.
I
I'll be like,
actually,
I've known her for 83 years. No, that's not
I've
rounding.
lost count.
85 years.
I don't know.
Well, you look
It
great
w-
for someone that's over 100.
I
We
know,
met
right?
after Julie and I met after this film came out. This 1984 film came out. We met after that, 3 years after that, to be precise. So
So never mind. If I take back
You
what
were
I said.
doing so well, Jason. You had it down. You're like, yeah, Julie was giving you this. She's like, yeah, Jason, you're doing it right. So good. And then I'm sorry, Julia. And we're good friends, so we could admit this. But Jason, you were doing so well. It was hard to hear. I'm so sorry.
Firestarter.
What you could have said was, I did not know Julia when this movie came out. That would
Right.
have been good.
That's
You're the fire starter, Jason. Twisted fire starter here.
Yeah.
I am the Firestarter. Firestarter is a 1984 American science fiction horror thriller film based on Stephen King's 1980 novel. The plot concerns a girl who develops pyrokinesis and the secret government agency known as the Shop, which is interesting because in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, it's called the Farm, right? So the CIA here is called the Shop. They seek to control her. The film was directed by Mark Lester and stars David Keith, Drew Barrymore, Martin Sheen, and George C. Scott. This is a heck of a cast. I mean, honestly, Art Carney is in this movie. The film was shot around Wilmington, Chimney Rock, and Lake Lure, North Carolina. There is a miniseries follow-up to the film, which I have not seen. So if it's wonderful, you got to let me know. And there's a remake that we discussed last week. So if you want to know what we thought about that, you can listen to that. But we'll probably filter thoughts about it into this. I have never seen this movie before. So this was a new experience for me. So, okay, let's get our opening thoughts. Let's go Tony, Julia, Drew, and then I'll go. Tony, Firestarter in 1984. I think this was one of the ones you wanted to watch, right? So what are your opening thoughts?
We were just talking like, hey, we can't not cover it, right? I think was how it happened. I like the movie. I'd seen it on cable a long time ago, and then I think Rain and I had watched it like a month or two ago, just because we were interested in, hey, what do we remember about this movie? I like the movie. Perhaps it isn't a perfect movie, but I do prefer it in many ways because as I was rewatching it, I was noticing how, and I still haven't gone back to reread the novel, but the dialogue and overall way that the story all happens is much more King-like.
Yeah, isn't that
like it
that's
has
the
all
case,
the
right?
beats that and especially dialogue later on we'll talk about, but there's a lot to it that feels more like King. For better or worse. And that can go, you may or may not. I mean, I'm assuming if you watch Firestarter, you're kind of a King fan, possibly, so I for me, a lot of this works a little better, and I think it's interesting that we're kind of flipping it. Usually we'll do the original and then move to the to whatever remake or reimagining or new film. But I think it's I kind of, even though this is definitely 80s, there's a lot of 80s stuff in here, but I think overall this is I don't think it's nostalgia. I think, again, it's interesting that the newer one kind of went a little darker, and the cast to that one's still really great, but overall I think since it hews closer, in my opinion, to how a King novel feels, that I prefer this one.
I really want to dig into that later because I want to hear more of your thoughts about what is that 80s kingness that you can that one can perceive at work in a film.
I think we see it on the farm part the most, but we can go over that once we get to it.
Julia, what are your thoughts? Because you watched Firestarter last week, and now we're doing this. So
As
overall, what do you think?
Yes, so we watched the new one last week. So I think we should probably try to avoid spoiling at least the end of the new one in case people are coming to this but haven't
I
watched it.
suppose that's true.
Or if we are going to spoil it, then we should definitely at least give a spoiler alert before we say whatever we're going to say. So, but for right now, we're not going to talk about that. Except just to say that yes, we watched the new one last week, and now we're going back in time. I there's a lot I really enjoy about this film. I really enjoy Drew Barrymore. I just adore her. She's such a great little actress. Well, she was such a great little actress then, and I still adore her. But she was just so cute and just great. Like, she does an amazing job. I think she steals everything she's in. I think that if you changed the name of the character that George C. Scott plays and didn't have him for any reason, because there's nothing American Indian about him. But except for maybe the long hair. But so then he would be perfect because he's a perfect villain. I'm like, what I come away with the most is that he is terrifying. Like, he is like one of the most. I think he's one of the most evil villains I've ever seen in a film. And so that was just, as far as horror goes, I think the fact that he is who he is even more horror than the fact that she's throwing fire and everything. The practical effects are amazing because it's all practical effects. There's no CGI or anything. So there's just the really, really good effects. They definitely do get a lot more into their relationship between the father and the daughter and all that than in the new one. And we don't, we have a lot less of the mother because, well, for reasons that we'll talk about later. And then the only thing is there's a lot of things that really bugged me, just stupid things, like the fact that I'll get to it later, but there were stupid things. But I really like the performances. I do feel like drags and spots. I feel like they spend way too much time at the shop, just kind of piddling around. So I would have liked to have seen some of that be cut a little bit, but yeah, I think it's a really interesting movie, and it's just so scary in a lot of ways that you don't expect it to be. So yeah.
Drew, what about you? What are your thoughts?
It's definitely a lot better than the more recent one. It's not a perfect movie per chance. Like, I feel like it takes a little bit to get going. But once it does, it definitely captivates your attention very well. I actually liked all the stuff at the shop quite a bit. Like,
I like it. I just think it goes on a little long.
If I were to trim this movie, I think I would have trimmed some of the on the run stuff at the beginning. But honestly, like, overall, like, since we're comparing it to the new one, I think that the stuff it does better is those sort of like relationship stuff and the like showing what's going on, giving characters depths and motivations that we can somewhat understand, or at least wrap our head around. And so it's just so much a better scripted movie than the new one. And of course, I'm a kid that like this is when my childhood is the 80s. So like I do enjoy seeing that time period. It's fun to see Drew Barrymore at this age, because I think this is one of her first movies. So I think this probably came out right after E.T. George C. Scott, yeah, Julie is 100% right. George C. Scott is such a creeper in this movie. Like he's so evil, and like some of the lines he says. It is unfortunate that they didn't just change the character's name or something, so he would, because they never really get into the idea of him being Native American at all.
Right.
He's just sort of there. But interesting movie, not perfect, but I was glad that we watched it. Definitely better than the remake.
So thank you very much. My thought is I did enjoy this movie a lot more than the remake, but what I admired, I think, more about the remake is I thought that the structure of the remake I actually liked better.
Yeah, me
Because
too.
the remake does this interesting thing where the shop is Act 3. So basically they're at home, they're for Act 1, they're on the run for Act 2, and then in Act 3, spoilers for the film, Dad gets captured, she goes to capture Dad, and so the big castle, as you would have in any typical film, is the shop, and it's Act 3. In this movie meanders in a way, and by the way, it's kind of a charming way that we recognize from Stephen King already. This movie meanders along like a Stephen King miniseries, in a sense, where they spend like an hour at the shop,
Right.
and it's weirdly balanced, and that I think maybe does make it feel like a big unwieldy. I'm picturing just holding this big blob like gelatinous blanket that I'm just sort of
Well,
holding up, and because it's a plot that is all over the place.
and I
Go
actually
ahead.
really miss, I guess because I'm a mom, I miss having more of the mother, like, because
Mhm.
the mother's
Mhm.
barely in it. And Heather Locklear, I mean, God, she was so beautiful that back then. It would have been fun to have her in more of the film. So that I did like about the remake more, is that there's
Yeah.
more of
So
that
I kind of
family.
I like the structure of the new movie more than the old one. But that's not enough for me to go all the way over to say that I prefer the new movie, because
Well,
I do. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
think it's the difference between how you choose to do an adaptation,
Mhm.
because it does make, if you're gonna hew closer to kind of modern a more modern sensibility about filmmaking, you might the idea of changing it in that way
Yeah.
does make sense, but also depends on hey, how close do we want to stick to the book? Because the 84 one's closer to the book, because hey, Stephen King's on the rise, we gotta let's
It's a
do an
really solid point.
adaptation that gives people the things they expect from a King novel in many ways. And
I
that's
wish I'd read
why it
it, by the
works.
way. I feel bad that I've
Yeah,
not read the book
I
yet.
it's been a long time, and I haven't had a chance to reread it over the week.
'Cause I couldn't tell. One of the things that often Stephen King, and let's actually just take a moment to talk about the Stephen King style and where this is in the sort of pop phenomenon that is Stephen King. One thing about Stephen King's novels that is unpredictable is you'll think like he is a very very what's the word I'm looking for? There's a sort of heart on your sleeve emotionalism to Stephen King, where he really
Transparent.
does mist up with a sentimentality about small towns and all that stuff. But there's also at the same time this counterweight of like nastiness and perversion and all kinds of stuff that he'll throw in, and he'll veer wildly back and forth. So because I haven't read Firestarter, I can't tell you if it is like it perverted, or if it is like just Stephen King doing his sometimes I wish I were Ray Bradbury thing, and
Mhm.
I have no idea. But like Cujo is really good at that, at being about these people who live in this small town, but they're also really nasty with one another. And it has an ending that he said people still write to him because they're pissed off about the ending of that book. So So I have no idea. But Tony, you talked about stuff that is the recognizable King style in this. What do you mean by that?
I think dialogue, for one thing. I want to get to it a little bit, but the farm, his interaction, one of the main differences in this and the new one was the interaction when they, go out to the farm.
You talking about Art Carney's farm, or you talking about the shop?
Yes, correct.
Okay, yep.
And the whole, hey, why don't you go out and feed the chickens and we're gonna have a beer, and how that all, like, the way that flows just feels like through and through King adapted. Like, this is the live action version. Could take out the visuals and you have the audiobook version. I mean, the dialogue is massaged and it's
but it's true. There's like a cornpone way of talking that these people have.
But not just that. There's nothing. It feels kind of authentic small town, but also just the way that all of that happens. The way that but it starts with with them on the run, and the way that is, and how he builds tension. Later on when they're in the bus stop, and what happens with the army guy, all of that stuff. The military guy. All of that stuff, just the way that builds. And I do feel pretty strongly, though, too, and I had to bite my tongue last week, actually, because a lot of the things Julie was talking about, like, I wish there was more family stuff, and I wish there was a little bit more explanation about the experiments and all that. I'm just thinking, like, that's all in the 84 version. Just wait till next week. Like, I'm just like, So, but I think the horror of the dad, finding things, the interaction we get where he, is getting Charlie back, all that stuff, and we'll go through it more. But all of these things feel like I was way more invested in their relationship in this, and I think that's again one of King's strengths. Is familial relations and small town. How even if you're not best buds, there's an affinity towards how everybody's relationship works,
right? And how they know one another. I mean, one of the best examples, by the way, to me of that is The Mist. Like the
absolutely
the way that people in the shopping center in The Mist talk to one another and use these strange sayings that I think King sometimes just makes up English language stuff that no human has ever said. It sounds like something somebody might say, and I guess it's something somebody says in the Stephen King universe. Like that. There's this point where William Sadler says, "The next time you start deciding to talk to me, you count your teeth." And it sounds like a saying that somebody maybe has said 1,000 times, but I will tell you, I'd never heard that saying ever before William Sadler said those lines in that movie. And King is good at that. That's just making up shit that sounds like America. It's astonishing. Also at this time, you mentioned the army guy in the airport, and he's a dick because his girlfriend is like, "I'm pregnant. How can you go away and not marry me?" And he's like, "Well, I don't know, baby. Maybe it's not even mine." And so the only presence of the army is that.
When you said that, I suddenly think of it as being Danny Zuko.
Right.
Rocking and rolling and whatnot.
But I mean, you've got that asshole, and then you've got the government guys who are all almost 201, cynical, murderous, duplicitous, and in the case of George C. Scott, plumb nuts. And this is prime post-Vietnam paranoia and government distrust. That like if there's a government, we have the presidential approval ratings, right? If there's a government approval rating, I think in 1980, which is when he wrote that novel, it is probably at its dead bottom, and which is also when Reagan wins, because people are like, I feel like trusting the government again. But this is that moment when people just despise anything that the government is behind. And so it is so easy to go, why is this little girl being hunted? Because of government stooges. And that also is a part of Stephen King with his, I love small towns, but I also believe that the government is like full of shit and capable of lying and murdering innocent people.
When they make it to Irv Mander's farm, he even calls them out. Like, hey, you can't.
Yes.
Are you the secret police? Like, he's totally. I was in the war there, buddy.
Yeah.
Whippersnapper. This is not what I came home for.
Oh my goodness!
I love that he
feels
goes.
that way. It's great.
I love that he's so willing to take on the feds just on the word of these people, to the point that they go, "We're here, we're the feds, whatever. We're here for whatever." And he goes, "I don't care if they assassinated the president or something like that." And I'm like, "Wow,
you need a warrant."
He really went far with that.
But that's because in this Stephen King universe, and probably in the popular imagination at the time, but in this Stephen King universe, the prima facie assumption is that the government is in the wrong,
and also they're on his land. That's
right.
something he fought. He fought in a war for. Like, this is his farm. Like that whole.
You got a warrant.
Yeah.
So compare that with where we are in 2022. So this is 40 years later, right? So where that whole spoilers for the second movie. In 2022, this gets just mishmashed all over the place, where you've got the cops who are ignorant versus the government who are evil. So you've got two different bunches of people in cars with guns coming to the farm, and you've got a drunk and out of touch farmer who has no particular opinion about the government at all, but he didn't call the cops. He did call the cops.
And
so
it's also, and that's just so much darker, that whole thing. Yeah. I think it does fine. We talked about it, but the thing with his wife and how that all turns out, that's again way less King in that. And maybe
I'm
going to
assume that's the case. I have no idea if that's in the book at all. I just
I mean, I think if I remember correctly, it works out more like the 84 one. Yeah. I am still fascinated and would love to. I'm sure there are articles that I need to look up more, but I talked about it before. I think you could do a fascinating book on the turn between the late 70s, Smokey and the Bandit style, Convoy, all of that, where just the distrust of police, the distrust of the belief in the working man, and that switch that happens between that time period and now, and just what led to that, because I think that is a fascinating turn.
There's so much water under the bridge there. I mean, that's a man, Tony, if you ever want to take that on as a research project, I want to be there for that, because
I've been tempted. That's a lot of, it would be a lot of work, because there's a lot to cover in that, but there's a huge difference between where we are now and that late or mid to late 70s to late 80s, even there's so many movies where even if you had kind of long hair, eventually you were still okay, as long as you were fighting the good fight on the convoy or whatever, right?
Yes. Well,
and I think that turn is I seeing that as we watching a lot of movies from just all over the place, in time period wise. I find that turn to be absolutely fascinating.
So I know we're chasing a rabbit, but let me ask you this a little bit. Okay, so you're right. In the Smokey and the Bear, sorry, not the Smokey and the Bandit. I was thinking about BG and the Bear, right? Because he's also kind of evading.
I mean, it was kind of all in the same thing. Yeah. Except you also had a spinoff of Sheriff Lobo, which was.
But that's the thing, is.
And we're far afield. We should probably get back.
Yeah, but all of this is going to relate back to Firestarter, I promise. But there was this notion in the pop culture that the individual could be basically good and respectable, but that the organizations were in the end going to get you down. So Sheriff Enos, maybe you could trust to come and have Thanksgiving dinner with you, but in the end, Boss Hogg is going to bring him down. Boss Hogg is what has become of the man, and and the only people you can trust are individuals like BJ and the Bear, or like Coy and Vance, or Luke and who's the other Duke boy?
Bo?
There's Bo and Luke too.
Yeah, Bo and Luke.
Coy and Vance, or Bo and Luke, yes, and so Stephen King is a part of all of that. Now, to reel it back into 1984, because they are They are on the run, and Art Carney, who is a veteran, nevertheless can tell that individuals are more to be trusted. And I guess you're right, Tony, that the problem with the new one is that it has lost that sort of belief in mankind. I guess or it's so cynically way over into individualism that
and that's the difference in the new one too. Is it's not just that he's encountered this terrible tragedy and it's filmed dark. I mean, it's filmed darker, right? Like all of that feels. He gets drunk and he makes decisions. But also he's at fault in the wreck. We find out because that's the twist.
Oh, right, yeah.
And and all that stuff. Like
it's full of
sort
bummers,
of a more modern take, but it's
bummers.
also decides that we're going to be a darker version. And I guess, maybe that's why I also react to this one is it didn't need that. The story of a girl who can just burn people to death, a horrible death, is already pretty frightening. And especially if you go with, George C. Scott's Rainbird. I mean, again, that's unfortunate because I really like the new John Rainbird in the new how that fits. But when the character in this one is just, I mean, it's frightening and great, but again, it's problematic because it's like
the new guy is a solid killer. Well, okay, I think I've landed on an idea here for what's going on with Rainbird and the Firestarter girl in the new one, is that it's so cynically way over to the side of individualism to the point where there are super people and then there's everybody else who are pieces of shit and deserve to burn. Whereas in this movie, the average man is a good man, and Charlie is part of that, and Charlie can be good too if she remains, in a sense, on the side of the common man, and that's clear. In other words, that's like when you think about it, that's classic Superman versus Man of Steel Superman.
And also, George C. Scott's character here in this movie, is also very much a product of post-Vietnam. Sometimes you just need this guy to take care of your stuff. Sometimes there's this terrible guy who will kill old people and children and whatever you need. And sometimes you just need that guy.
Right. He'll do whatever the hell is necessary. Yes.
Because he was necessary in the war, and that's how you went, like, quote unquote, win. Even if you lose the war, you need these guys. Right.
Yeah.
And he's firmly a product, especially of the pop culture born out of that.
Yes.
Right. As far as what we see what we see in film and television, and directly out of that. He plays that part really well. It's unfortunate, though, I will say, that if I remember correctly, his original intent was more of this girl has these superpowers. It's something greater than it ties into my beliefs, etc. When in the movie he just comes out as a really creepy child obsessed.
Yeah, so let's
killer.
pick that apart. Julia,
and that's pretty gross feeling.
Would you like to try to explain what seems to be the motivation of Assassin Rainbird in this movie?
So he says to Martin Sheen's character, Martin Sheen's the head bad guy, basically. He says to Martin Sheen's character, after you're done with your experiment, like after you're done experimenting with her or finding out what her deal is, let me have her. And he goes, why do you want to have her? And he goes, because she's young and beautiful, which immediately you're like, ew, what the fuck? And so then he continues on to be like, I just want to have her. I'm gonna basically, it's like I said to Jason, it's grooming 101. It's like, I'm gonna get her to trust me. I'm gonna be I'm just gonna be. It basically ends up becoming this orderly. He takes on the character of this orderly who is, who's flawed and who gets afraid of the dark and who has an eye that, an effed up eye. And by the way, I found out, Jason, that the reason that he has the eye patch sometimes and not others is because he has a contact that he was wearing to look like his eye is fucked up, and then it hurt his eye, and so he got an infection, so he had to wear the eye.
No kidding.
Anyway, but so he's like, I'm gonna just be like this, whatever. So he creates this persona, and it really is grooming 101 because he creates this persona to get close to her, to get her to trust him, and then you think, well, what the hell? And the thing is, remember, we're watching this with 2022 lens, but in 84, you don't assume everybody's a child predator. And so, but even then you're looking at this guy going, so he's got some kind of weird designs on this kid. And then he says, like, Martin, she's like, what do you want to do with her? After a while, he's like, and he goes, I want to get her to trust me, and then I want to look her, I want her to look me in the eye, and then I want to kill her, basically. Like he's, I think the line is, I can't remember. I'll find it.
Basically smash her nose and
smash her nose into her brain so that little fragments and he's already done this to somebody else, so we know he can. He's like, so the fragments of her nose will go into her brain. So it's just completely demented. I mean, like, I've never heard anything like it.
But then he says why. He seems to believe that if he does that, he will absorb her power, not like he'll be able to be a fire starter, but somehow that her spiritual power will be absorbed by him if he kills her.
When he can take it into the afterlife, because he says, when I die, which I hope will very soon, I will take her power with me into the other world. So it's
that's a great
sort of it's sort of like got this necromancy thing going on.
Super weird.
But
I'm sure that this is Looney Tunes, Stephen King. I don't understand First Nations bullshit.
Also, I mean, we also have to, looking it up and kind of doing a little bit of research. I mean, at the time, Stephen King wasn't a fan of this movie.
Oh, really?
When he saw the rough cut,
he wasn't a fan of any movies.
It also got, it wasn't, Ebert saying it was boring and stuff like that. And I'm watching it now, and I'm, like I said, I'm going, well, it feels kind of King-like. So I mean, what the hell do I know, right?
But no, he actually approved the script. He actually approved the script, but then he still didn't like it because he didn't like anything that gets made of his books.
He liked one thing. Stephen King loved the 6 or 8, however the hell long The Stand is. He liked The Stand, the original.
Well, and I think he liked the Shining TV series. Okay,
he directed it himself, so he's kind of stuck with it.
He didn't direct
all right with that.
He didn't direct that.
No, but he wrote the
screenplay. He did write the
screenplay. I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
you're right. You're so right. I'm so sorry.
What did he do?
He did Maximum Overdrive.
Right. Which you're precisely correct.
He still will throw that one under the bus.
But what was his involvement with The Shining? I didn't hear what you said.
He wrote the screenplay.
He did write it. Yeah, that's right.
Right. Yeah.
But backtracking to George C. Scott for a second, like my reaction watching this is that I hope that Drew Barrymore, when she was filming this, was oblivious to how creepy this relationship was.
Seriously.
Right.
Like I hope that George C. Scott was like good at like playing his stuff, bringing the sliminess to the table, but like I hope they filmed it in such a way that it went over her head, and now maybe she looks at it as an adult and go, that was creepy. But
very possible. A lot of actresses will say stuff like that. Like, I had no idea what this stuff meant when I was doing it.
Well, and especially if you don't know what the lines are or what the things are that's going on when you're not in the shot.
That's true.
That's true, because the creepiest stuff he says to Martin Sheen, and
right.
But he's so effective at shifting between this really overtly sinister character to someone that you can kind of see a little girl trusting, which is
absolutely
like,
especially because she's missing her father, so she needs a father figure.
Yeah, awful.
They've separated her from her father. Her father's being held in a different part.
Yeah.
No, so excellent point. I mean, we should spend some time on some of the other parts of the cast, actually. So we've talked at length about George C. Scott, and by the way, but before we do move on, George C. Scott, man, was he reliable, by the way. Because anytime you see George C. Scott's in a movie, he is never bad. Never. Like, there is no bad George C. Scott performance. You sometimes can go, I'm not sure if he's right for this, but boy, is he interesting.
I mean, the worst usually you can say is maybe there's some scenery chewing.
Yes.
But I mean, even that, like, I'm okay with most of that. Like, he's gonna act the hell out of it, and it's gonna be solid.
Boy, was he good. It's unbelievable to me. He died in 1999. I can't believe we've been so long without George C. Scott now. But I mean, he's in The Changeling, which is like nobody dares remake The Changeling, because it's only George C. Scott was really good at like yelling at a house and gone, "What do you want from me?" Like,
yeah,
like who's gonna do that? Zac Efron can't like yell at a house, you know? Who's gonna do that? And
until my new miniseries, Zac Efron yells at a house. That's just the name of it. What's this show? What says it right there?
Zac Efron yells at a house.
10 episodes. I'm down. No, and Exorcist 3, and he brings the creep in Exorcist 3.
Oh
and if you read the book, you kind of understand even more. But, reading the book, reading Legion, like, I go, oh, that's what he was bringing to it. Holy crap. Wow. So yeah, he's just solid.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah. I just really so Martin Sheen is here. Martin Sheen is here just about the time that he was playing JFK in this enormous and extremely highly rated JFK miniseries. And boy, does he look like JFK. This is so funny because, and it can't be an accident, right? You've got this guy cast and he looks like a Kennedy. So it's more of that sort of.
But he wasn't supposed to he was supposed to be Burt Lancaster.
Really?
And then he had heart surgery and Martin Sheen took over at the last minute. So he wasn't anticipated, but yes. But I think he does a great job with this character.
No, that is super duper interesting. That's really wild. Because casting Martin Sheen, he looks like the picture of American trustworthiness. I don't know what Burt Lancaster is. Burt Lancaster is like beautiful Hollywood, which is a totally different thing. And I don't know, that would have been interesting. He's also way older, right? And Burt Lancaster would have been closer to Martin Sheen's age. And so that would have been very interesting. You got Art Carney. We talked about him on The Farm. And finally, Brian Keith. I have to say that Brian Keith as the dad.
Well, don't forget. You're forgetting. And now I'm forgetting her name.
Louise Fletcher.
Louise Fletcher. Yeah, she's great too. I mean, she's not
David Keith, by the way, Jason.
What did I say?
Brian
Keith. Oh, I'm sorry. Brian Keith was Family Affair, right?
Right.
Yes, I'm sorry. The Wind and the Lion. Yeah.
David.
You're right.
But yeah, but Louise Fletcher, I mean, I don't think she's used her full potential here. But as soon as I saw her, I was like, "Oh, is she gonna be bad? Is she gonna do?"
No,
because you just expect her to be a bad guy.
She's just a nice farm lady. Yes.
Yep.
Oh,
so that's
man.
okay. So I do want to say that's one of the things that, like I said, there were some dumb things that really bug me. And one of the dumb things that really bugs me is after they see the farm couple sees what she can do, because she sets sets everything on fire when the feds show up. They're like, leave, get away from us, go away. And then at the end of the film, spoilers for this film, that she comes, Drew Barrymore is now an orphan. She finds her way back to this farm and they accept her with open arms. And I'm like, wait, what happened to get the hell away from us?
Well, I will buy that though.
That was more her than him.
Yeah, but she's the one who accepts it. Like, she's the one who. Yeah, Louise Fletcher's the one who hugs her.
But that's their. This is a flimsy argument, but that's their arc. Is they told her to get lost, but now when she's vulnerable, they're going to.
Well, I think
I'm just saying I would have liked to have seen either them not say get the hell away from here, but just rather you shouldn't be here. They're gonna come back, like something like that, so that they don't seem like they're freaked out by her. Or when she comes back, have some kind of conversation with her before they just kind of go, great, we have a kid now. You know what I mean? I just feel like there was something missing there. That was one of the things about it.
I think it's also, the change, like, I mean, she lost her dad. Like, all of this stuff is tragic, right?
But they don't know any of that. They just see her show up.
Probably told them whenever she shows up.
We literally see her get out of the car and then they hug her and the car drives away. So it's like there's no time for exposition on her part.
I think it's shorthand, Joya. I think you have to assume that they're like, you're an orphan now and we're going to take
I'm also assuming that there was a phone call ahead of time, perhaps.
Yeah, that makes sense. I didn't think about phones
there's
being
not,
Also, as freaked out as they were, are you really going to turn away a little girl?
Right.
Especially
I know.
Drew Barrymore.
I'm just saying she is super cute. I'm just saying I needed to have some little piece.
Couple lines of dialogue would have taken.
Get away from
here. I get you.
Yay, we have a new kid, a new child. But I think you're right. I think even like the line could have been,
we got your call.
They could have looked at each other and said, okay, she's here. Like something said that we know that they're expecting respecting her instead of just being like, oh, look who showed up,
Yeah.
yay, new child. Anyway, whatever. It's just a little
I
thing
just
that bugged
figured.
me.
I'm with you. I figured it was just shorthand. By the way, also Freddie Jones as the Doctor. He's another person that when you hear his voice, and you see him act, that's another person where you he's in this movie. And I love his turn as the Doctor. You know, and I think that was, we could have used, you know, seeing him more in here was also, you know, Julia, when you were talking about like, the Doctor part was just kind of not even long enough in the new one.
Yes.
Here you get it. And I wish, you know, we had such a talented actor in the new one. I wish there was more of that, because here,
he's
you know,
not
Freddie
around
Jones
enough,
gives us
right?
all Freddie Jones gives us all of that, and I'd forgotten, and you know, it's his voice and demeanor in any movie where he, you know, great actor, great character actor.
Did you, Tony? Do you associate him with Firefox at all?
Oh yeah, I mean, he's been in so much stuff. You look at it. Also, Dune, like.
Oh right, yeah, that's true. That's true.
And he, you know, he's in Hammer films, like in Satanic Rites of Dracula.
I always associate him with Firefox, just because he's so good at like giving Clint Eastwood his like training, dialogue and everything. Just like
that was not to get too far off, but you know, my grandfather, I would come to stay with them, and I would watch as much. I didn't have cable, so I would watch as much cable as humanly possible when I was like movies all the time. And there was a summer where Firefox was on constant rotation. I mean, that movie must have been on like 4 times a day.
Mm-hmm.
And I swear to you, my grandfather, you know, he would watch stuff, and he would watch the news and, you know, Johnny Carson and stuff like that. But anytime Firefox was on, if he happened to pass by, we would usually just end up finishing Firefox. And whatever stage it was, my grandfather would come by.
I'm telling you, that is a damn good movie. Firefox is a wonderful movie. But it's great way to structure a film like that.
Oh, he was in, you know, French. He's also in Young Sherlock Holmes. He's just in so much stuff, so much cool stuff.
But back to what you're saying, yes. So I agree that the whole thing with the beginning, you know, with what I consider to be the beginning of the story, really, it's not it's not the beginning of the movie, but you know, with Heather Locklear and what would you say his name was?
It's David Keith.
David Keith. Oh my God. Yes. So them being in the lab, and then having, you know, the doctor explain everything. So like you said, Tony, last time, where they kind of they do that whole storyline just in the credits of the new movie. That this one, it's actually spelled out. They talk about what's going on. Oh, some of you are gonna get placebo. No, nobody gets placebo. Everybody's dead except for these two. For whatever reason. And so you immediately get a sense for what's going on, who this guy is, what, you know, that this is, or is this part of the shop? No, nothing like that. Yeah, it totally is. All that. So you immediately get a sense of, oh, this is some bad stuff that's going on here. This guy is not to be trusted. So yes, I did appreciate having more of that, and which is another reason why I'm upset that there's not more of Heather Locklear in the movie, because, you know, you kind of like already invested in her in that relationship.
Yeah. Especially when they are meeting and sharing their psychic bond that they share.
Yeah, exactly.
You kind of want to see I agree with you that it would have been nice to have a hybrid between the amount of you know, mom that's in the new one. Like splitting the difference would have been great. Because they build that initially, but you see less of it with their interaction. Even though even the kitchen scene though is pretty similar. I thought that was interesting that they kept kind of that.
Well, and the kitchen scene in this one. So again, spoiler for the new movie. In the new movie, she burns her mom's arms really badly, and in this one, she the little girl feels horrible guilt about what she did to her mother. But then when you actually see it, she just sets the oven mitts on fire. She probably didn't even, because oven mitts are meant to be hot, she probably didn't even have like more than like first degree, you know, whatever the least amount is of burning is. You know, she probably was just a little bit burnt, but it's definitely not the kind of horrible damage that she does to the mom in the new movie. So that was interesting as well.
I'm coming around to Tony's theory that there's just too much like knee-jerk nastiness in the new one that's not necessary, that, you know, it's not necessary to carry the plot forward.
I think that it's expected in a modern take, and take that however you want. I feel like, especially, Blumhouse has kind of a like, let's make things really dark, and that's their aesthetic. That's what they're known for. So I don't want to. I'm not. It's not a critique on is it, but the way that darkness feels in the new one, maybe it's nostalgia, maybe it's just me, maybe it's how but I prefer the up and down nature of the way that the 84 one is, especially like so going back to Andrew McGee. In this, he's haunted, but he never lets that haunted nature at any time interfere with him consoling Charlie, trying to improve her mood.
Yeah.
He takes on that, whereas Zac Efron, the new one, seems to be truly like he can't escape that. He's constantly in this kind of emotional, like, things are dark, man.
Yeah,
I just keep moving.
That's true,
and that's how that they've chosen to adapt that.
That's
when
a
you
really
see
well.
this,
It's also
where
in the performances.
there's a lot of I have to suck it up and make sure that my daughter's taken care of, and that she's that I don't let that darkness invade any more than I have to.
Well, a lot of that can be summed up in, again, spoiler territory here, but the way he actually tries to get her out of the shop in this one, whereas this one, he in the new one, he's like, okay, I'm gonna order you to burn everything down, and including me. Like,
I'm with you.
He basically abandons his child, and
right.
He still dies in this one, and it's still very sad, but like at least he's trying to get her out, and he's trying to get himself out, and darkness or whatever, like the emotionality of that just plays better.
You're right, it's very different. It is way darker in the new one. They die in both. They know they're going to die in both. So, but the weird "you must kill me" versus get away and burn everything down on your way out. Those two are two completely different concepts. Can we switch for a moment to the fact that it's weird to me that it seems to me that, let me say this a different way. I believe the effects of Charlie burning the fuck out of the whole world around her is way cooler in the 1984 version. I like seeing the fireballs that she
again,
throws.
it's the practical effect. Those are real fireballs. That's actual fireballs that they're using, and they're actually burning stuff up. So that stuff always makes a difference to me. I just think it's
is
really
that the
great.
answer? Is it just that we're looking at practical effects and it's cooler?
Well, that's part of it.
I think well, comparatively, if I remember correctly, at the time this has a higher budget. Like, you compare them adjusted for inflation or whatever, it's still a higher budget film. But I think the CG looks okay in the new one due to the budget, and I think that sometimes the fireballs, like, I love practical effects. Sometimes they move a little wonky in this, and that, to me, that's part of the charm. Like, I'm not, you can't. I mean, since we aren't gonna, the way you would throw a fireball, practical effects, like, you're gonna make choices on that.
It's gonna move along a wire, which means it's gonna bob along that wire.
Is, I think, really effective. And boy, oh boy, I mean, even in the scene at the farm too, which I think if I remember correctly in the book, like, there's even more destruction, but all of it's going down. Like, all of you people, you've shot this old man, and he was helping us, and now, like, that snap where there's people on fire, there's cars exploding left and right, like, all of that stuff. It's like, whoa.
Right. I love that she can target people with a fireball, which is an overkill, by the way. Like, when she's blowing up the shop, this antebellum mansion.
Also,
cool
the guys who have the, like, we're in fire suits. This will work out great.
Okay,
it does not work out great.
That's what I want to talk about. So, because that was when I was saying that there were some dumb things that really bothered me. That's one of the dumbest things to me, is this sequence of events. She blows up everybody that comes out to the farm. Then
you're talking about in which version?
In the one that we're reviewing right now, 1984.
Okay.
then we, the audience, see her tell her father, I feel bad about killing people. I don't want to do it anymore. I promise I'm not gonna do it again. He's like, cool, whatever you say. Nobody else hears that conversation. So why on earth did Martin Sheen and George C. Scott and all these other guys and all these scientists just have no problem just being in a room with her with no fire suits, nothing? Knowing that, because the fire suit guys don't show up until way later, they don't have any reason to believe she's not going to set them on fire. That bothered me. Like it really, I know Jason hates this phrase, but it really took me out of it at that moment, because I was like, this makes no sense to me that they would just be like, because they haven't. It's not like in the, again, spoiler for the new one. It's not like in the new one where they have ability blocking things, where with like the contacts or whatever. Nobody is taking any kind of protective measures against these two superpowered people, except for the drugs that they're giving the dad, but they don't know if that's going to do anything, they're just like going along and there's nothing. I'm just like, that just really bothered me.
I think I got the impression they were also possibly drugging her, or at least the way that they have coerced her to keep her in check, I think was where they were like, well, we're pretty sure this will work. I get where you're coming from, but I didn't have as much of a problem, just because I figured the shop government think tank they knew how to, I mean, they've seen how to manipulate her. And I think that is...
Yeah, but just from the beginning, she could have set them all on fire, and she didn't. Anyway, so then yes, you're right. Then they do have, so a lot of people don't have fire suits on, just like in the new movie. There are some people have fire suits on, some people don't, and you're like, why doesn't every single person have fire
and in this movie,
on?
the fire suits are ineffective anyway.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah,
so
they're helpful, but they're not enough.
Well, I wanted to take a moment to compare this with Carrie, and how in the novel, by the way, of Carrie's rampage is way more like big budget than in the movie. The movie's so good, by the way. I don't for a second want anybody to think I am throwing shade at Carrie the movie, because damn, that is a good sequence. But in the novel, it's like a full-on I'm destroying this town rampage, where she just sort of floats down Main Street blowing shit up. And this is it again. And this seems to be one of Stephen King's bizarre fantasies of, some extraordinarily angry young woman taking out her wrath on the world
with fire,
which you got to admire. I guess
kill it with fire. And Drew Barrymore does a great job in the whole scene where she's just like focusing on things and she does great.
I mean, I'm kind of glad I didn't have superpowers living in a small town and catching crap constantly. That would have been there. I don't know what I would have done. I want to say that I would have gone, you know what, these are people, all right, but well,
but
when you get bullied and messed around enough, I don't know.
Well, that's Stephen King's fantasy, right?
Much like this version of Charlie in this movie. I don't remember the book, so I don't remember what the version of Charlie in the book is. But you, Tony, just like this version, have a really good heart, and she does too. Like she doesn't want to be killing people. She hates it when she kills. She doesn't just lash out and like just murder people. She lashed out a little bit at the guy who was being a jerk to his pregnant girlfriend, and she set his boots on fire. Like the dad said.
Well, and that's different too. And that's one of the things that why I speak about the kind of mean-spirited nature of the lesson,
because of the cat thing.
Is the cat thing. And here it's a guy who's a complete asshole.
Yes.
Like,
and she doesn't
don't tell me. Yeah, and she doesn't even like, it's not, she doesn't just burn him to the ground. But even then, and the dad has to go, look, that was really bad. Like, let's not do that. But there's a huge reason other than like, this animal lashed out at me. And I think that change in how those lessons are learned is part of that, in my opinion, kind of more cynical nature or more or darker version. Like you see this, and it didn't have to be a lesson of, put this suffering animal out of its misery, even though you caused it to be suffering in the first place. This is, hey, that, you really hurt somebody. Even if he was a jerk, he's still a human. We need to think about those things. But the way that lesson's taught in those two instances, I think speaks volumes in how you choose to present do that adaptation. and that's why I kept picking up. And again, this is 84. We've got decades between the two, so sensibilities are different, and I totally recognize that. I'm not saying you may like one or the other. You may find the 84 one to be more quaint, for example, depending on your tastes and sensibilities. But to me, that was such a fundamental change in how you choose to present the darkness of in the horror in this. Very different takes on that, very different ways of doing that. Maybe it's just me. I prefer how that's the vibe of the 84 version overall.
No, I agree.
Not just nostalgia, because I like plenty of dark things and will watch all kinds of, a lot of different horror movies, but I prefer it to hew closer to that vibe overall myself.
Well, it also has a cheese, like, despite the fact that they're trying to be quote unquote darker, it has like a cheese factor to it that I feel like this one doesn't. And maybe the sincerity that Tony keeps talking about is what keeps it avoided, but I also just think this one has more depth to it, because they, with the exception of the mother, like Julia was saying, they spend more on the relationship, whereas the new one is so goddamn hurried to get to the rampage scene that everything feels a little sold short, and also just kind of corny. And I think this one, I'm not saying that there isn't stuff about it that isn't dated or quaint or whatever the word you'd want to use, but it's definitely got more gravitas to it, because the characters are more multidimensional.
Yes, I agree. And one more thing I wanted to mention, that Stephen King has these fantasies of downtrodden characters, beaten up characters, bullied characters, suddenly, having a final sort of explosion of anger, right? And I think the reason why so many of these characters are female is because he wrote about in his memoir that he had thought that the examples that he saw of the worst bullying and the worst dehumanization was directed towards the women in his life, which is fascinating to me, because it means that you can bitch all you want about Stephen King, but that's a pretty astonishing thing, that he's like, I want to bring people's attention to how shitty women have it, and that's
well, and
amazing.
He says he patterned the character after his daughter, the character Charlie.
Really? That's amazing. Yeah. So I think
we have to talk about the end, and we have to talk about it in a way that's going to spoil the end of the new movie.
Didn't we just talk about the end?
No, but we have to talk about the fact that. So I'm just saying, I want to spoil the end of the new movie.
Okay,
I have
go
to
ahead.
say that I way prefer her setting Rainbird on fire to the whole bullshit at the end of the new movie.
I forgot all about that.
She walks off on the beach, where he walks off on the beach carrying her and holding
that was
her
a
hand
very.
Although, and I did not like the ending of the new movie, but Rainbird, for all his flaws, doesn't seem to have the sort of underlining of pedophilia in the new movie.
Well, no, this guy definitely deserves to burn.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. This Rainbird.
I'm just saying the other dude didn't deserve to have her spend a nice happy life with her after that.
No, I mean, he's still the guy that killed her mother. We don't know who killed. They don't show her mother being killed in this, so we only see the after effects to know if it was Rainbird or not. But I mean, it feels more honest that George C. Scott meets an untimely end, although he wanted to die soon, so I guess it's still kind of a happy ending for him.
But he didn't get the power.
He did not get the power.
At least as far as we know.
He got it.
We don't know.
Used on him.
Yes.
Yeah. He got power, but it was just him on fire directed at him.
You're right. There's an unbelievableness to the ending they choose to put in the 2022 version that is just probably a step too far for the audience. Probably the audience will go, well, whatever, it's just a movie. But I'm sure a lot of them are like, I don't know. I don't see that happening.
And here's something. And again, I think each of these adaptations has their strengths. And so again, I hope that I don't go too far on it's just dark and stuff on the new one. But I almost want to say, watching this again for the second time and not too long, I don't know if in the new one she would have saved the horses. I don't know if in the new one the horses would have gotten saved. It feels like because we spend actually like decent amount of time watching bolts get, set on fire, and hey, look, although it is great when like they don't care, and then all of a sudden the horses just trample a bunch of bad guys. That is somehow like, yeah, that's right. Even the horses get some revenge. Good on you. Way to go, Necromancer. You stomp those bad guys. Go for it. Yeah. But I just feel like that cynicism and that darkness, if that had played out similarly, I'm unsure if that same setting, would they have just burned up, because that's like, oh, see how this power is horrible and scary and dark. That's the difference in my mind, and that's the feeling. And maybe the screenwriter could listen to this and go, what? No, I'm not that like, what do you think of me? Like, that's terrible, Tony. How could you accuse me of that? And they might be right.
That you're thinking about the screenwriter sitting here going,
I mean, again, I don't like when people say things about my works, so I try to keep that in mind. Unless you're bad people, even then it's your work. But I don't give as much a pass if people are really jerks. But we're all trying to make it, and you get a job as a screenwriter, and you put your heart and soul, and it takes a while, and then it takes a while till it gets made and all of that. But that flavor is how I view the difference in the two films. And again, somebody could argue like, no, that's we made these choices and this is why, and it could be maybe, again, like I said, I could be out of touch. Like maybe that's the modern sensibility, and I'm shaking my fist at clouds. I don't know.
Have you ever thought about this, Tony? Like this might be an ignorant question, but why is it like if we're going to make a new 12 Angry Men, to be honest with you, you just use the same script because it's a play. You're going to do a new one. It's just like the old one.
Sure.
You might change a line here or there, and you might, to whatever. So they're not all men, so it'll be 12 Angry Jurors. If you're remaking Firestarter, why can't you just use the old script? I don't understand why you bother even bothering to write a new script.
I do believe that there are different sensibilities, and again, I think having it be the studio that's shooting it, and their what they feel is their brand and how they what brings it to the table. I think there's a lot of factors. I think modernizing some things that makes sense.
Well, we talked about the structure.
Again, we're all trying to make money, right? Like that's as much as we like to separate art and commerce. Commerce is still the driving force of a lot of art. I'm not saying all of it, because the new, like the way you view it's not exactly indie. I mean, it's lower budget, and that's fine. Like I love low budget stuff, so that's not a knock at all. But I think looking at, hey, I think people will like that. Again, I would never want to accuse a screenwriter or producer, or especially screenwriter, because just as a writer, I'm gonna feel that, right?
Yeah.
Nothing against anybody else who changes things or directs or whatever, but I don't want to say that they're going, man, let me write this thing to appeal to X, Y, or Z. But you may get those notes,
Yeah.
And I think there is I kind of want to, it's like you said, like you felt like the structure worked better in the newer one, which is not the structure from the novel. So already you're making those choices as a writer, right?
That's an excellent point.
So there, I think that's part of your answer. Like we feel that, we may feel more comfortable with the 3-act structure that intensifies action at the end, as opposed to like, hey, we're going to go to the prisoner island for a while. And, the dad's going to deal with addiction and his own things, and then we're going to have a part where there's coercion, as opposed to like she's going to tromp up to the castle and rip and tear after an emotional send off for her dad.
Well,
and so those choices are perhaps more modern choices, and that's I think what answers your question, in my opinion, is what do you choose to update, and would it even work to to just kind of slightly update, like, oh well, now it's 84, but it's not like it's 84 vibe, but now everybody has cell phones. Is that, and we talk about that because that's part of, that plays into the new one. Like, hey, we don't have cell phones, we don't have all these things, but we have to bring that up because we're in 2022. Right?
I just want to point out that in Act 3, and I know it's annoying to use those terms, but you can spot it in a movie. And not only is it just a predictable Act 3 in the new film, but it even uses, like, if you've read a lot of those, a lot of the screenwriting books that people live by as Bibles now, Act 3 now has 5 beats. So it's, you gather your team for Act 3, you execute your plan, you fail at the plan, you dig down deep, and then you execute the new plan. and those are the beats of Act 3. And you can almost set your watch by it as you watch it. I mean, that's where we are in Hollywood now.
Sure.
And I'm not complaining. Again, I'm very happy people make money, but it is amazing to me that you can.
And it's hard to separate it's so hard, as you well know, to separate out what is just, we're going to write it this way, and that's what we're hired to write.
Yeah.
Versus we wrote it, and then this happened, and then we got notes.
Oh yeah.
Right? And that's part of, again, that art versus commerce kind of, you're making commercial art. Sometimes you get to do it your way, and sometimes, though, we've also seen where you get your own way and it's not probably as good. I mean, you and I have both seen some movies where we go, ooh, that was certainly a director's cut.
Yes. I mean, certainly you can have somebody over and they'll go, oh, I know it went wrong, and let me tell you what happened, and basically the only thing that you can do is just, drink either alcohol or hot chocolate, whichever way you go, and just go, yep, that's shit that happens. We should move on and get our final thoughts about Firestarter 1984. And I'm so excited actually to get to our recommendations as well. So Tony, you were the opening thoughts. You're the first. Go ahead.
Yeah, I still like it. I like it. Like I said, despite the fact that King was like, at the final product, or I guess at what he viewed, I guess you were rough cut from what I was reading. I like the more King flavor of things. I really like this cast. I like the stuff on the run, and I even like, hey, we're at the island of the prisoner, but it's called the shop. And George C. Scott is creepy and terrible, and should creep you out. I think it's even more creepy now as an adult. But it's effective. I overall I prefer this one and the flavor of it. And some of that could be nostalgia, but I think it hews closer to what I think are the strengths of King's narrative and his dialogue in many ways. And I think that's why I keep coming back to why I dig on this more. It's not a perfect film, but I like it a lot though.
Thank you very much. Julia, what are your final thoughts on Firestarter?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about most of it. Like I said, I love the effects. I love the sets. I love that. I mean, how random to do to have the shot be at this plantation house or whatever, the antebellum mansion. That was just really, I was just so like blown away whenever they gave them their rooms. Like, well, they're sort of swank rooms, man. And then I think, like I say, the effects and the performances are really the highlights. I had talked a little bit at the beginning about feeling like they spent a little bit too much time at the shop because I wanted there to, because there's so much of just, like I say, people just talking with her or talking with the dad, and I feel like you want there to be more of them using their powers, and there's no, like I said, really good reason for them not to at that point. So that part is where I kind of got lost, and also the order. Would like to have seen more of Heather Locklear. I've mentioned that as well. I can't think of anything I haven't really mentioned, so I think that's it. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed it.
Excellent. Drew, what about you?
I feel like the only thing that we didn't touch on, although we did touch on this last week, was the sort of X-Men-ness of it all. This definitely really does feel like Stephen King's X-Men. Even this one even more so than the new one, because the Rampage at the feels much more superhero-y. But yeah, other than that, I don't think I have anything to add. Like I feel like I sort of said my piece. I think that this is a much better film than the new one, which I did not really like much at all. So yeah,
that's a lot. I mean, that does say a lot. So what you're definitely telling people is, hey, don't necessarily go out to see the new one. Go to Peacock and watch the old one. I'm dying to know if we should watch the miniseries follow up, because that just promises. I love stuff like that where you know that you're just fighting an uphill battle. Somebody says, "Hey man, deliver unto me a Firestarter miniseries," and you're like, "Okay, I'll do my best. Here we go." Yes.
But not only that, but a sequel miniseries. So
it's a sequel miniseries,
you're
and it stars
extrapolating a
Marguerite
lot, right?
Moreau, who in Wet Hot American Summer, she's the lead of Wet Hot American Summer. She is so darn cool. So it would be neat to see what that's like. I'm sure that because I did not know it existed until last week, that it's possible that it falls short of its goals. But nevertheless, I'm interested in watching it. All right, let's get our endorsements. I'm dying to hear what you guys are going to recommend. I know what I'm going to recommend, and it is related to Firestarter, and it is not Marguerite Moreau in the sequel miniseries. So, Tony, what do you have for us?
A few things. One of the coolest things that happened this week was in France, they released basically a stoner rock Bible called the Stoner Freaks Anthology. And they did a part 2. They did a Kickstarter for it, and it is a pretty amazing book. French and English translations with just basically a catalog of stoner rock bands. And the first one is super heavy, and both in bands and physically heavy. Which starts off even with like, here's what the progenitors of stoner rock, for example. And it ends up that they put Deserts of Mars in the Stoner Freaks Anthology too.
Oh, fantastic.
We get a blurb, and they were really nice, and it's really cool. And there's so many other bands that I dig that are in there that was just a huge honor. I really just made my year, my month, at least. Just, hey, I work hard at my band, and sometimes you feel like, oh, is this worth it? Because you got to pay for everything, and it's harder to tour and all of that now.
Yeah.
So there's those dark nights where I'm like, oh man, how do I keep going? And then you get something like this where you're, yeah, it's a blurb, and it's not, but it's you with all these other awesome bands that you dig, that you listen to all the time. For me, and I thought that was just super cool. So Stoner Freaks Anthology 1 and 2. When I got the package, I was like, holy crap, this is like a heavy, and it's a nice, it was well worth the Kickstarter price, because it is a well-produced book, beautifully bound. It's fancy when there's the little ribbon for marking your place.
Awesome.
Little bookmark ribbon attached, like, feels weighty. But like, again, so many of my bands, my friends in Duel who are in the first one, Jeff from Duel produced our last EP, and he's a good friend. They're about to tour in Europe, and they got a whole interview and everything, and it's just super cool to see all these people that you admire and that all together in this like tome of music, which is pretty rad. Also, Rain and I this weekend watched Killing It with Craig Robinson, and it got a little darker than I thought, but it is really hilarious. I was really digging it. Like, we had a good watch. And then also, if you want to see, so a friend of mine, Josh Furtado, who watches a lot of cinema from India, has brought people over and stuff like that. Has I looked at his Twitter posts. He writes for, I believe, Screen Anarchy. I'll have to look it up. He's been touting a film called RRR, and he is right. It is, boy, is it a movie. 3 hours of Indian cinema, just wow. Yeah. And Josh does write for Screen Anarchy. I just want to get that. But he's worked with Fantastic Fest, and bringing people, he's a big world cinema person. But unfortunately, I haven't been able to go to a theater to see this, which I've heard is like the true experience, is seeing it on a huge screen with a crowd of like-minded individuals. I have missed that, but it's on Netflix. It is dubbed in Hindi. It's not the original language, but wow, is it just, romance, action. I love this new trend where, people all over the world are kind of taking a cue from where Hong Kong cinema kind of went with epic, martial arts action and adapting that kind of flavor. And the set pieces, some of the animal CG, maybe isn't as good as perhaps like the Jungle Book movie we got over here, but boy, it is everything I love about cinema. There's romance, and since it's Bollywood style, there's a dance and music and martial arts and colonial era stuff, politics. Whew, it's a lot. It's 3 hours, so you got to kind of take some time. It's okay to take an intermission, but it's on Netflix now, and I hope maybe I've overhyped it, but I don't know if you're gonna go full on. Let's do this. This 3 hour epic is where it's at. So
awesome.
And if you have a Netflix account, still RRR. You type in the 3 letters and it takes you there, and you're in for 3 hours of just it's a lot.
Okay,
but it's great.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Julia, I don't know if you have anything that you're as enthusiastic about as Tony is about RRR, but tell us.
I'm so excited for anybody who has ever watched Downton Abbey, especially if you watched the last movie, to watch the new movie. It is so good. I loved every minute of it. Downton Abbey is a show that if you got into it, you absolutely love these characters, and they all have just great stories. In this new movie, it's bigger than life. It's definitely a film, like it's not just an episode on screen, because it's just very grand, very grand. I've missed those guys, and it was really, really fun to see them in the screen.
That's so nice.
So yes, if you have to have seen the last movie and probably rewatch it if you haven't watched it in a while to really understand this. It's not a standalone type of thing. I don't think. I think you'd be really lost if you didn't know the characters. But it's great if you're a fan.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Most of my friends who are into it have mirrored that enthusiasm, so that's always cool. It wasn't my bag, but I always, when I hear this thing was really cool and I liked it, and then they've continued making all the cool things like that always does my heart good. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Drew, what about you?
Well, yesterday I was a sponsor and a vendor at the Underworld's Horror Movie Film Festival, which is a spinoff of the Otherworld's Science Fiction Film Festival, which has been around for a few years now here in Austin. I didn't get to see too many of the movies, but I did get to see the last movie of the day, which is called Revealer. And one of the reasons why I was very curious about it is that one of the screenwriters on it is Tim Seeley, who is a comic book writer. He's known for most famously for doing the comic Hack Slash, which Halloween Man, of course, did a crossover with. So I know him at least a little bit, and it was cool to see, something like I could definitely see his writing style coming through and all of the characters. The movie is about a peep show stripper and a fundamentalist religious protester who they have to kind of team up together and try to survive what appears to be the biblical apocalypse as predicted in the book of Revelations. And I don't really want to tell too much more about it, other than that I think that this movie will very quickly become a cult classic. Like it's got a lot of personality and it's got a lot of cool stuff going for it. It's a small film. It basically follows the two leads throughout it, and they have good chemistry with each other, and their relationship, the way it evolves, is really interesting. The movie's going to be cropping up on Shudder next month, so I hope everybody who listens to this podcast will go over and check it out there, because it's just a really good film, and I think a lot of our listeners would get something out of it. Anyway, the movie is called Revealer.
Okay.
I heard about it, and friends of mine were digging it. it looked nice and stylish as well. So
yeah, it's set in the. I guess I should have mentioned it is set in the 80s, so it has like a certain aesthetic to it. It doesn't like slavishly ape the look of an 80s movie, but it does get the sort of texture of it. If the lighting choices and everything in particular remind me a lot of the movie Vamp, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think that's astute.
Yeah, but it also has a synth score, which I know is becoming more and more popular, but definitely evocative of the time period. But yeah, it's a good flick, and I was happy to I was happy that I was able to see it ahead of its release on Shudder. The other thing that I've been checking out today, I was just so exhausted from that. Like I was out until 4 a.m., which I haven't done in years, with the film festival. So most of the day I just sort of bummed around the house, but we had been watching the Angeline miniseries on Peacock, which is a really interesting look at a weird character from Los Angeles history. For those too young, Angeline was this woman that was very into publicity, and she bought all these billboards throughout Los Angeles, and they've made a mini series detailing that. Emmy Rossum is the star in it, but very
unrecognizable.
Funny.
You cannot
complete
tell.
Transformation.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
The that they've done on her, like you would never know it was if you were to see her from Shameless and see her from Angeline, like in the same room with each other, like it would be just completely different. But very, very, very fun series so far. I haven't watched it, but I'm having a good time with what I've seen.
Very cool. Wow. Okay, so I saw Men, which is this new film starring Jessie Buckley, who if you saw The Lost Daughter, the young, the young woman in The Lost Daughter, with the main character, she's older, and there are lots of flashbacks. Anyway, that was Jessie Buckley, and the director is Alex Garland. Anyway, Men is about this. It's essentially a haunted house story at its base. It's a haunted house story about a young widow who's in terrible grief and shock and trauma, going out to a rented country home that she's going to try to get away, do a little work from her summer cottage, and the moment she gets there, things start getting weird, mainly because she's threatened by a number of different, possibly ghostly men. And sometimes there's just jerk-ass men who just live in the village, and jerk-ass cops who don't take her seriously, and the jerk-ass landlord and a jerk-ass vicar. And the hilarious thing is that they are all played by Rory Kinnear, who's this actor who you will know from like every James Bond movie, as he plays Bill Tanner in the more recent James Bond films, and very reliable actor. But he's tour de force here. He's doing full I was just thinking, this is like, it's one of those roles where he plays like 14 different people under like different hair pieces and stuff like that, and it's a horror movie, and it is weird, and I hope somebody listening goes to watch this movie, because I need somebody smarter than me to explain the end of this movie. But definitely worth seeing. I liked it a lot. I was often scared. There are at least a couple of jump in your seat scary moments. So good, but I don't really understand the ending, and so please, somebody go watch it, and then
he is actually my second favorite Frankenstein's monster. He played Frankenstein's monster on Penny Dreadful, and he was so great in that part. And I feel like the one that is the most like the version that's in the original novel. So it's based off and then him. And I'm glad
that's high praise. That's a really excellent point.
And
yeah.
I'm glad to see that he hasn't completely abandoned the genre, because he was so terrific in that role.
Yeah, so that's a hell of a movie. That was really, really wild. So okay, great. This has been our discussion of the 1984 Firestarter. We had such a good time. I know we're going to take off Memorial Day, which I think is coming next. Yeah.
That's next.
So we'll be back after that, and we might be just digging into some wonderful, crunchy 80s adaptations of Stephen King. I hope that's where we're going. I believe that's what we're doing. So
I hate to interrupt, but I should add, in addition to, I talked about my friend's band in Duel, who's about to be touring Europe. Another friend of mine's band, High Desert Queen, is heading to Europe really soon. I went to their kind of next to the last show before they go to Europe. But if you're looking for some awesome music, they're on Ripple, the label Ripple Music. High Desert Queen. I don't know how much, this podcast goes all over the world. But, if you're listening to this in Europe, I hope maybe you'll be able to catch one of their shows. And if not, I still recommend their debut album. But yeah, check out High Desert Queen, because good people, awesome music, and it's cool again to see people getting out there and rocking it. So I just wanted to add that because I
that's
thought
fantastic.
that because I was just able to go this past. I haven't been able to go to a lot of shows. I tend to be one of the few people there still masked, and that's okay. But
there we go.
I was finally able to go, and it was cool. As to give them some love as they kick off their first European tour, which I think is really cool. So check out High Desert Queen for sure.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tony. All right, everybody. Have a wonderful week. If you're still listening, come to the Facebook page. Tell us what you thought. Tell us what you think about 1984. Tell us that we are totally being unfair to the new one, and we would love to hear about that. Everyone, have a wonderful, wonderful evening and week, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Night.
Good night.